true and faithful relation of what passed for many years between Dr. D and some spirits. 1659, Meric Casaubon printed it, and this is called, his actions with the spirits and etc. Saturday afternoon, 6th hour, June 15th, 1583. After that, the noble Albertus Lasky had been, D said, I used some discourse, by prayer to God, afterwards protestation to Galuah in respect of her willing me to ask certain matters again this day, which, the marks down after that, the noble Albertus Lasky with me, and was gone to London. Okay, and after the dot, after the gaps, I guess, yesterday were not answered, but very long he was, about half an hour before anything appeared more than the golden curtain, all over the shoe, probably stone, and such. At length appeared diverse confused forms of diverse creatures, and then, by and by, vanished away. I prayed to God to banish all confusion from us and our actions, and to send us lucum eo veritatem per unum eo propter, unum eo constantium verum, and so on. Then appeared he by whom before we were called ill in another dialect, seemed to scorn at Edward Kelly. Edward Kelly said, Here approacheth ill. He seemeth to mock me. Ill said, That is a gird to you, sir, for your fishing. D said that Edward Kelly had spent all that afternoon almost in angling, and I was very desirous to have his company and helping hand in this action. D said shortly after this appeared Galuah to be in a field closed round about with a hedge. Galuah says there is no way out. Ill said, Come, I will do somewhat for you. It is a strange thing that wisdom cannot find a way through a hedge. Edward Kelly said, This ill pulleth down the hedge. Galvah said, Go thy way, thou hast done but thy duty. Ill said, Farewell, D. Farewell, Kelly. Edward Kelly said, He is gone. Galvah said, Those that safety of everlasting blankets, farewell, and desire the same to others. Edward Kelly says, Now she is come to the great cattle gate of all stone, with the drawing bridge afore it. There is like a greyhound graven, are cut in stone, over the gate. Galvah says, It is very late. I will look if I can have my entertainment here. Edward Kelly said that she's gone. In. He said after a while she came out again. Galvah said, Be it spoken, cursed to face, and damned be this place. And why? Because they have puffed up their flesh, follow their own imagination, wallowing in their filthiness, as swine that tumble in mire. Behold, it is too late. With this people, I can get no lodging. O ye, my feet, be a witness against them. Let the winds move the dust to report their unkindness. Edward Kelly said, Now she goeth a long great way, like a common highway, and the light of the air about her seems somewhat dark, like evening or twilight. Galvah says, Yea, though you have too much light, I have too little. I did but overbear you, when you saw me not. Dee said, Note that I had spoken too much. Light coming from. I had spoken of too much light coming in from the west window of my study toward the table, where the shoe stone stood, when it began now to attend her coming, and thereupon she spoke this. Etterkelly says, Her own garment cast a light. Now she cometh among the company of men, having gowns furred with white, and some of them having velvet caps and some hats. One of them said to her, What art thou? Galvah said, I know not what I am myself. Will you buy any precious stones of me? Now, that's something different, but then, the stone that the voice was out of a part of. But a lot of people, when they have their spiritual communications, they start doing things like, well, the spirit wants them to have, this stone or herb or something on an altar and that sort of thing. Edward Kelly said, She taketh out of her bosom a great many precious stones, uncut or unpolished. These men look on them. Galvah said, Truly, they are pure and good. They say also, Surely they seem good, delivering them from one to another. There appear 2 fat men, who said, Let us first get money, before we buy such trifles. Besides that, they have not the perfect form. Galvah said, I pray you, buy one of them me. Will you buy none neither? Etterkelly says, She speaketh that to them, who first praiseth the stones. Galvah says, Tush, I pray thee to go about thy business. Dost thou not perceive how they are found fault? Withal, Galvah says, Tush, tush, they be not cut for your fashion. Be it said, their senses are gluted with transitory vanities. Let them, therefore, perish vainly, because they are transitory. Now, nowadays, the voice coming from the stone. One of the things nowadays, I couldn't understand the voice. I'm going to share. Oh, well, this will be up, but I shared something regarding the 6th Enochian key, and it's like the stone had a communication, but I couldn't understand it in terms of words or anything like that. But the gluttony, the gluten, well, so if you overeat bread and all that stuff, you're going to have problems. If you overeat anything, you're going to have problems. But you probably shouldn't quit gluten if you don't have health problems associated with it. If you're one in 1,000 people has a wheat allergy. Some people have, there's chemicals they treat food with, or there's genetic modification of food, and people some of that people have issues with, and people have different issues with whatever. And there's real people with celiac disease, but let's not make 1 out of 10,000 people the rule for the rest of us. And certainly those with issues can't actually quit. If you're going to be hospitalized because you had gluten, you're not the same as the people that can, I have a cheat day. No, you don't have a cheat day if it's a health issue. But yeah, anything that people overdo. And certainly concentrated all sorts of stuff from food is, if it doesn't cause problems now, it may later. So just, regular food and all that other stuff takes sound medical advice. But yeah, sort of delineated. But Edward Kelly says, Now cometh where she must clamber up a wall, having steps in it of ragged stones. There is a fair building beyond it. There go many up those steps, and when they are almost at the top, they meeteth them, some, who take them by the hand and help them up and over into the place. Then one of them that stood at the top of the wall, who had a furred gown, and helping men up, said to her, Come away, woman, wilt thou come up? She saith nothing to him, but standeth still, and looketh away from him. Edward Kelly says, Again the man said to her, Come away, wilt thou come up? And this parable of prophecy is diverse times spoken of afterwards in the troubles of England. And we return to what Galvah said. Unhappy are those whom, we're now talking what Galvah said. Unhappy are those whom thou helpest, and whose breath hath infected many. Your hands are too bloody for me to come anigh you. Edward Kelly says, Now come handsome women to the wall. And some said, Good sister, I pray you come away. Galvah says, Your voluptuous father knoweth me not, for his daughter I deny you. Well, this is Y-O, but it's you and some other words. Edward Kelly says, Now come 2 or 3 brave fellows with rapiers by their sides, and having hats without bands, and their hosen pinned up with no garters. These help up people that come, and one of them said, Tarry a little, woman, and I will help thee shortly. So the attire of the wanton of the youth of the court is in the margin. Galvah said, Fie upon you, your clothes are infected with abominations of your chamber. I will tarry time. Edward Kelly said, Now cometh a big stout man to the top of the wall, and a boy with a crown on his head. He seemeth to be about 18 years old. So it is, and please your majesty. Therefore let this way be raised, said Galvah. Edward Kelly said that he spake to the young king upon the former talk between them which I heard not. Oh, wait, no, is that what the 18-year-old appearing entity said? Because it doesn't say Galvah right next to this. And then they're speaking again, be it done. So the stout big man is in the margin. And then be it done, and Edward Kelly says, The wall quaketh and falleth down, and some of the jolly fellows which were on the wall before fell down, and other fellows came and digged a great hole, or a breach in the wall. Because the wall was broken down. Galvah said, Thanks be to God, now there's entrance enough. Edward Kelly says, She goeth in. Now is this thing that's like an H the right order? And wait, I think your image might be backwards, but but that on the outer side typically, but so we have that would be backwards, right? Backwards from my perspective, but so she goeth in. The young man are stripling with a crown on his head, and the other big man embraceth her. His crown is a triple crown, or 3 crowns, one upon another. He hath a little thing in his hand, which he holdeth close, and overgrippeth, so that it cannot be discerned. And the big man says, Though thou hast travelled as a woman. Thou shalt now be known as a man. Edward Kelly says, he spake to Galvah. They embraced each other. They fetched clothes for her, and put upon her a black gown, a man's gown, as the gown of a counselor. Galvah transformed into a man, as we see this. She kneeleth down like a man in form, her head and all. Edward Kelly says, then the young king spake to her, saying, what this rod may do work. Edward Kelly says, he giveth the transformed man a rod, one half being blood, and the other half white, the partition of these two being longwise. A voice out of the stone, the transformed man, a voice out of the stone. Qua justa sunt, faciet eo meas, mensurabit virtutes, for until it was appointed, I sought it out. Let us cleanse the court and examine the multitude, for error is always covered in many. Cursed are those that are judged by a multitude. Now, to me, it just seems pretentious, this artificially just inserting foreign words and foreign statements. Yes, if we're saying what the quote of Plato or whatever sacred scripture or whatever is this, and then we're explaining it, but just throwing in, but kind of say what it means, or just quote scripture, but just to quote things because it's Latin. It's just pretentiousness. And it doesn't really help the effectiveness of the message. It's like I've encountered people of various religious traditions that just throw in random foreign words where it's like, if you don't know the language and you're bilingual and you don't quite know English well enough, okay. But, Edward Kelly says, all they that fell off the wall, and they would have helped her up, and they come bound hand and foot. The transformed says, root, well, this is a side note, so I'm assuming this is Galvah, maybe. Root them out, O king. Pity no such persons, for those be these that never had mercy on themselves. Edward Kelly says, now cometh a woman out, having a crown on her head. She hath a long visage. The big man saith, nay, let her drink as she hath deserved. Edward Kelly said, the transformed man layeth down the rod before him, and beginneth to weep, and said, let it not be said, but I pity the anointed. The big man said, let her die, for she hath deserved death. Edward Kelly says, the other men about her lay hand on her, and pluck the crown off her head. The transformed man, taking up his rod, and layeth upon the top our crown of that woman's head. The woman said, the young king saith unto her, what wilt thou? If it please you, pardon for my life and dignity. Edward Kelly says, the big man and the young king talk together aside, and the woman holdeth her hands abroad, and knocks her breast, and great company of them about her are hewed in pieces by tormentors armed. Adjuvabo. The voice out of the stone said, and the transformed man, we're talking about, Edward Kelly says, and the big man come in again. 1582 is what they're saying here, but we're giving account of 1583, so I don't. The king said to the transformed man, be it as thou wilt, be you the two joined together, for I wish you both well. Edward Kelly says further, the woman boweth down with obedience and thanked them. Edward Kelly says, the big man taketh the king by the hand, and the transformed man taketh the woman by the hands, and putteth her hands to the hands of the king and the big man, and they take each other by the hand and kiss her. Edward Kelly says that all is now on the sudden vanished away, and the transformed man is returned again to her woman's shape, And she said, spirits have agendas that they fulfill by their taking on certain forms, right? And she said, well, Galvah said, now, I will go with you, sir, your journey. Edward Kelly says, she speaketh to you, Dee. And she continues, to Dee, I will lead you if you will follow me up, but you must have broken shins. Dee says, by God's grace, and with this help, I will follow you, and in respect of my shins breaking, the joy of the consequent effect will utterly take away the grief of the shins breaking. Galvah says, and to you, sir, you were best to hunt and fish after verity. Well, wasn't Edward Kelly that tried to escape from prison and broke his legs and died after that as a result of infection? Dee said she spake to Edward Kelly because he spent too much time in fishing and angling. Galvah says, whom thou sawest here shall govern the 21 kingdoms. There's 21 Enochian letters. 21's in a particularly importance in the Yazidi mythology. Dee says, if there be no mystery in that speech, the conquest must be great, and the trouble great and strange. Edward Kelly says, she goeth on her way along a lane. Dee said, we know not who should be that king so showed. Galvah says, sure thy demands are fully answered. Consider thou what thou seekest, and of whom thou seekest, and by whose help. Then look to that which is declared. I will follow my office, for in those things wherein thou art inquisitive, I've shewed the end. Dee said, truly the occasion of my present asking you some questions arose upon the matter concerning the noble Polonian, of whom you bade us yesterday ask as this day. Galvah says, vanity hangeth not at mine elbow. Believest thou that already spoken I say of him? Dee says, yea, forsooth, I do believe it. Galvah says, I say unto thee, his name is in the book of life. The sun shall not pass his course before he be a king. His counsel shall breed alteration of the state, yea, of the whole world. What would thou know of him? Referring to Prince Albert Lasky amongst this, right? The whole world. What would thou know of him? He says, if his kingdom shall be a Poland, or what land else? Galvah says, of 2 kingdoms. He says, which I beseech you. Galvah says, the one that thou hast repeated, and the other he seeketh as right. He says, God grant him sufficient direction to do all things so, as may please the highest in his calling. Galvah said, he shall want no direction in anything he desireth. As concerning the troubles of August next, and the dangers then, what is the best for him to do? To be going home before, or to tarry here? Galvah says, whom God hath armed, no man can prevail against. He said, in respect of my own state with the prince, I pray how much he hath prevailed to win. Me do credit, and in what case standeth my suit, or how I am to use myself therein. Galvah says, I have told you that at large even now, and if you look unto those things that are now told and are now done. He says, concerning Charles Sled, his nose gushing with blood twice yesternight, and this morning upon my charitable instructions, giving him to virtue and godliness. Galvah says, I know him not, nor any name hath he with us. He says, meaning he well towards me. Galvah says, whatsoever a wicked man meaneth, it is not well, but in that sense it is demanded, he meaneth well. The evil spirit that possesseth him was cast out of him, even at his nose, in the presence of those. Charles Sled? Dee said something, and then Galvah said, believe me, we know not his name. Trouble me no more with him. Dee says, O Lord, though men be frail, faulty, and filthy, yet thy mercies are most praiseworthy. Among all generations of all thy doings, Galvah says, hold thy peace. We're now to execute the justice of God. Really rumbling the tumbler here. Galvah says, hold thy peace. We are now to execute the justice of God. Dee says, I spake a great while of the mercies of God and his justice, and gave thanks for our calling and election into this blessed state. Galvah said, I will take up my lodgings for this night. Dee says, God grant me worthy of such godly guests. God grant me dwelling with you, where his name is eternally praised, glorified, and sanctified. To him all creatures, rendering thanks, honor, and glory. Amen. And Galvah, or whoever says Amen. And the voice out of the stone again. This voice, well, it says a thing. Dee says, this voice out of the stone being taken to be the voice of God, importeth as much if God himself had sealed to that as his will and decree, that all creatures should render thanks unto him, and glory. Fiant dictum eo justum est. Amen. And we'll continue with Tuesday, June 18th of 1583. And okay, yeah, that's so we're in the table. What are we at? 131. Sad complaint as from God of incredulity, the incarnation of Christ, and thereby the privilege of Christians above the Israelites. Now, if he was less dogmatic and more literal about his Greek, he'd understand that Jesus wasn't the only Christ, but so just like the whole Avatar thing, if you look into the language thing, it's not that God incarnates. God sends an individual who is the sent one, the Omnual, the Christios, the Nabi, in Arabic, Rasulullah, that sort of thing. And thereby privilege of Christians above the Israelites. It's not your ancestry, it's whether or not you follow the knower that's spreading spiritual knowledge that's been transmitted through revelation and inspiration. Tears. Dr. Dee sent with an errand to King Stephen, and a direct promise, and a proffer of the philosopher's stone. Dr. Dee delivers his errand in Latin, but here are records I know not by what chance are very defective. King Stephen, it seems, did not prove so credulous as was expected. 132, page 408, the spirits are angry and commanded all to be shut up for a season till further order. The account of some months is wanting. And largely one of the things is, whether we're dealing with beings of choice or beings that have been called by God, spiritual experience isn't so under the control of our will. It's like, every day in the late afternoon, probably about 4 o'clock, I'm going to, it doesn't happen with the frequency or the timing or whatnot that a person per se wants. Now you can learn to visualize stuff, and that's kind of different. Action 133, page 409, the power of God, the Jews in Jerusalem to be restored, and now one Francis Puccius, is it Puccius, a Florentine, zealous and learned papist, being entreated and admitted to these secrets, with great hopes of some good to be done by this fellowship, Rome also being designed henceforth for the scene, see page 417, the spirits apply themselves and fit their speech to this end and occasion the interpretation of scriptures, the fathers, the church, Luther and Calvin condemned, the Pope of Rome cannot be, say the spirits, the Antichrist, and think they prove it, exhortations to return to the church, and a form of prayer or thanksgiving to that purpose, in the conclusion that the spirits apply themselves to Pucius personally. He is to rebuke the present Pope, here called a wicked monster, against whom, if he will not be persuaded, terrible judgments are denounced, the same action, because the spirits are rather chose to speak English than Latin, were of, which makes more sense. Somewhat is said in the preface, in Latin by Dr. D. 134, page 417. The sum of Francis Pucius, his commission in high language, future actions in Rome, but here followeth a hiatus of some 6 months, which bereaves us of many particulars. In the meantime happened a sentence of banishment against Dr. D by the Pope, mediation and authority, as his nuncio, page 434, doth acknowledge, and so break the purpose of going to Rome, though much driven on by Pucius, and etc., as will appear. Page 418, Dr. D's record of a strange thing, a very miracle in his judgment, that happened in his presence and sights, to wit, books that had been burned by him are in his sight, restored unto him, the whole and entire by spirits, etc. Yeah, stomach's growling at me. Don't know if you can hear that, but I apologize. 135, 419, or pardon me, I guess is the right phrase. 419, Prince Rosenberg, you may see his titles in page 425, called and admitted into the society to be partakers of the mysteries, and executioner of so supposed God's judgment, and etc. Prince Romberg, upon relation of what had been revealed concerning himself, accepts of it thankfully, promises amendment and praise for the emperor, whose viceroy he was in Bohemia, and so on, and that he may not be destroyed, but repent after. Page 421, a letter of his with his own hand to Dr. D of the same purpose. And I would say that if you've promised to keep things mystery, a secret, keep that promise.